My name is Alma Mountain, and I was 13 years old when my parents left me on my uncle's porch. If you wanted to pinpoint the moment, circle it in red ink like a teacher marking an essay. It wouldn't be a screaming match or a slammed door. It would be a sticky note on the refrigerator. Crooked. Yellowed at the edges like it had been peeled and reused. Stay at a friend S, back in a week. Love you, no signature, no explanation. Just my mother's handwriting, looped, elegant, careful. The kind of handwriting that suggested grace, even when delivering abandonment. They left the morning of my birthday. I remember because I woke up early. The way you do when you're still young enough to believe birthdays matter, even if you pretend they don't. I padded into the kitchen expecting balloons or at least pancakes shaped wrong. Instead, the house felt hollow, like it had exhaled and forgotten to inhale again. The fridge hummed. The clock ticked. The note waited. I stood there for a long time, reading it again and again, convinced it would change if I stared hard enough. Like maybe another sentence would appear if I proved I was patient. It didn't. My phone buzzed a few minutes later. Jasmine had posted a photo, pink suitcase, airport floor, captioned family time, with a heart emoji. Lily followed 5 minutes after with palm trees and sunshine and a string of laughing faces. Florida. They'd gone to Florida without me. I sat on the porch with my backpack balanced on my knees, convinced this was all a misunderstanding. That someone would show up. A neighbor, an aunt, my parents themselves laughing about a mix-up. No one came. The sun slid lower. Streetlights flickered on. A dog barked at me like I didn't belong on my own front steps. That night, I microwaved a burrito I didn't like and ate it standing at the counter, pretending the microwave's buzz counted as conversation. By the second day, I told myself it was a mistake. By the fourth, a quieter thought began whispering. What if it was? Being the middle child had always meant being useful but invisible. Jasmine was the star, awards, varsity jackets, proud smiles. Lily was the baby, dance recitals, cupcakes color-matched to themes. I was the bridge between them. Responsible, quiet. Adults loved calling me easy. Easy really meant unseen. But being forgotten on purpose was a different kind of silence. It echoed. 6 days in, I left the library with a stack of borrowed books piled against my chest like armor. The heat shimmered so hard it blurred my shadow. That's when the black car slowed beside the curb, glossy, expensive, out of place. The window slid down. Alma, the voice startled me. Familiar but distant, like a song you half remember. I turned. Uncle Richard, the rich one, the one who stopped coming to holidays before I could multiply double digits. My mother called him conceited, which I would later understand was code, for he doesn't let us walk all over him. His eyes swept over me, the backpack, the sweat-plastered hair, the smile I wore like armor. Why are you out here alone? He asked. Where are your parents? Florida, I said. The word sounded ridiculous, like I was saying they'd gone to the moon. And you're here, he said quietly. Whatever came next was a comment I wasn't meant to hear. Then he opened the door. Get in. You're not walking anywhere tonight. Every safety lecture I'd ever been given screamed in my head. But hunger has its own volume, so does being unwanted. The car smelled like leather and something sharp and new, not cologne. Money, fresh and unapologetic. He took me to a diner with cracked red booths and pies trapped beneath glass domes. When the burger arrived, I stared like it might disappear if I blinked. He didn't rush me, didn't interrogate. He waited until I'd eaten half before asking, What do you like? History, I said. The parts everyone gets wrong. That made him smile, small, knowing. When he dropped me off, he didn't park, just idled. Pack a bag, I blinked. What? You're not staying alone in a dark house while your parents shop for sunscreen. His house felt like another planet. The bed looked too clean to touch. I perched on the edge, afraid to wrinkle the sheets. They can be washed, he said gently. Things exist to be used, not feared. Morning came with orange juice in a real glass. At home, our cups were plastic souvenirs that still smelled faintly of sunscreen. When my teacher asked who would attend my school meeting that week, Richard answered without hesitation. I will, 2 words, heavy, anchoring. I didn't know what to do with generosity. I hid clothing tags, saved lunch money, ate crackers instead of real food. It took 12 days before he caught me crouched over a cereal box at midnight. "If it's in this house," he said, pushing warm pasta toward me, "it belongs to everyone who lives here." I nodded. Didn't cry. Crying felt like an expense I couldn't afford. Weeks passed, then months. No calls, no knocks. Jasmine's feed bloomed with beach photos. Lily S with shells and smiles. My name never appeared. Richard came to conferences, bought me a desk, took me to doctors, called it maintenance, like I was something worth keeping in working order. At 13, I tested boundaries. Came home late once, forgot to text. He handed me a sandwich. "Glad you're alive," he said. "Next time text, otherwise I'll assume you're in a ditch and buy a shovel." Care, but with structure. On my first Christmas there, he gave me a leather journal with my initials pressed in gold. "Write what you notice," he said. That night I wrote, "Things here are meant to be used, not feared. If it's in this house, it belongs to everyone who lives here. I am in this house." The words felt bold, borrowed, but something warm stirred anyway. I didn't know yet that this house, and this man, would become the hinge everything turned on. I only knew that for the first time, I wasn't waiting on a porch anymore. By the time I turned 14, Uncle Richard had reached 2 conclusions about me. First, my posture was atrocious. Second, whatever lived under that slouch was worth correcting. "Stand up," he said one morning as I hunched over the kitchen counter, cereal bowl hugged like a shield. I straightened reflexively, milk sloshing dangerously close to the rim. "Not like you're apologizing," he added. "Like you're allowed to exist." That was how most of his lessons arrived, casual, almost throwaway, tucked inside everyday moments so they wouldn't scare me off. He never sat me down for lectures. He just adjusted the world slightly and waited to see if I'd notice. At first, I didn't. Posture felt cosmetic, like smiling in photos or wearing clothes that didn't itch, but he kept at it. A light tap between my shoulder blades when I folded inward, a quiet reminder in public places. "Head up, Alma. You're not punctuation." I rolled my eyes, because rolling my eyes was safer than believing him. "People believe you more when you look like you already believe yourself," he said once, not even looking at me as he buttered toast. It sounded like something printed on a poster taped to a guidance counselor's door. I dismissed it the way I dismissed most advice, by pretending it applied to someone else. But the thing about repetition is that it sinks in sideways. I started catching myself mid-hunch, straightening, squaring my shoulders. It felt ridiculous at first, like wearing shoes that weren't broken in yet. But teachers noticed. They called on me more. I raised my hand without my heart trying to claw out of my chest. Confidence, I learned, wasn't a switch. It was a muscle, weak at first, embarrassing to use, but stronger every time you forced it into motion. The first time I tested it publicly was debate club. Richard bribed me with pizza. "I don't argue," I told him, arms crossed. "You argue constantly," he replied calmly. "You just don't do it out loud." The room smelled like dry erase markers and teenage certainty. I sat in the back, knees bouncing, convinced I'd made a mistake. When my turn came, my voice wobbled like a bad speaker system. The topic was ridiculous. Cats make better pets than dogs, and that somehow made it worse. I expected laughter, judgment. Instead, people listened. I spoke about independence, about consent disguised as companionship, about how cats didn't pretend to be loyal if they were. When the judge announced I'd won, the room blurred for a second. Richard stood in the back, arms crossed, smiling that quiet smile. The one that said see. He didn't clap loudly, he didn't brag. He just nodded like this had always been the expected outcome. That was another lesson. Confidence didn't need witnesses. At home, life developed a rhythm, not loud, not dramatic, but consistent. Richard cooked on Sundays, actual meals, not things that came in plastic sleeves. He taught me how to read ingredient lists like contracts. How to tell when a price was inflated just because it could be. How to clean as you cooked so mess didn't become resentment. He didn't rescue me, he equipped me. When I asked for a new phone, he didn't say no. "How much have you saved?" he asked. I blinked. "None." "Then you'll appreciate it twice as much once you earn it." So I got a job bagging groceries. My first paycheck, $73.16, felt like proof of existence. I waved it in his face like a trophy. He didn't take it. He drove me to the bank. "Two-part rule," he said. "Save half, spend half. Enjoy today without robbing tomorrow." I rolled my eyes. Years later, I'd realized that sentence was the spine of everything I built. Holidays used to make my stomach knot. At my parents' house, they felt like theater, matching outfits, forced smiles, cameras always ready. At Richard's, they were quieter, realer. Christmas came with snow-damp air and the smell of coffee instead of chaos. His gifts weren't flashy. They were chosen, a gently used copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. A fountain pen heavy enough to feel intentional. A scarf he claimed matched my debate face. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed with photos from Florida. Palm trees, posed laughter, "No, wish you were here." "No, we miss you." The sting still came, but it didn't hollow me out anymore. It reminded me instead that I was learning what family looked like when it wasn't staged. One year, he handed me a small box. Inside was a silver keychain, an engraved mountain, and the word Carlton. "A work in progress," he said. I frowned. "What is?" "Both of us," he replied. "You're learning to build." "I'm learning not to do it alone." Words failed me. I hugged him instead, awkward, too tight, too sudden. He froze for half a second, then hugged back. He didn't let go first. By 16, he started taking me to his office during summers. I hated it at first. Pressed suits, shining desks, people who spoke like gravity bent around them. During introductions, Richard leaned close and whispered, "Relax. They put their pants on one leg at a time, some fall over doing it." I laughed. The fear cracked. That became our running joke. He taught me how to listen before answering, how to hear what people meant instead of what they said, how to grip a handshake like you meant it. "Half the world bluffs," he told me once. "The other half apologizes for existing. Do neither." That sentence lodged deep. At 17, the contrast between my old life and this one sharpened. Jasmine posted college acceptance photos. Lily posed beside a new car. I stared at my phone one night while Richard brewed tea. "They don't even check in," I said quietly. "Not a text, not a happy birthday." He didn't look up. "How long do you plan to wait for them to remember you?" The question landed like thunder. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. That night, I stopped waiting. I began remembering myself. Senior year arrived like a held breath finally released. College applications sprawled across the table. Financial aid forms, spreadsheets. Richard didn't hand me tuition. He made me fight for it. "Scholarships first, grants second," he said. "My help fills gaps, not foundations." So I hunted. A scholarship for left-handed students. I taught myself to write left-handed. One for descendants of beekeepers. I wrote about balance and survival despite having once fled a bee screaming. Piece by piece, I stitched together a future. When the acceptance letter arrived, Richard examined it like a deal he'd personally brokered. "Congratulations," he said. His eyes shone. "Now go prove them right." Move-in day was chaos. Parents crying, balloons bobbing. My parents didn't come. Richard carried everything up 3 flights of stairs in August heat. "Annual workout," he joked. Before leaving, he handed me an envelope. Inside, "If you ever doubt you belong, check your reflection. You got here without them." I taped it inside my planner, kept it there all 4 years. College was harder than I expected. I felt like an intruder in second-hand shoes among effortless confidence, but Richard called every Sunday. "Still eating ramen and determination?" "Barely." "Good." "Struggle keeps you sharp." His voice anchored me. Sophomore year, I met Ethan. He didn't try to save me. He respected me. One night, he asked why I double-checked everything. "Because I was the mistake nobody fixed," I said. He took my hand. "Then let's make sure no one overlooks you again." By senior year, things aligned. I graduated in civil engineering. Richard clapped louder than anyone. He handed me a silver pen. "Use this to sign contracts you'll be proud of." That night, rereading my old journal, I understood something new. The house wasn't a building anymore. It was a life, and I lived inside it. By the time I turned 18, I understood something most people don't learn until much later, sometimes not at all. Blood explains where you come from. Choice explains where you stay. I learned that distinction slowly, the way you learn the weight of something by carrying it long enough that setting it down feels unnatural. College sharpened everything. Distance does that. It strips excuses bare. At home, Richard's home, my home now, my parents existed mostly as names that surfaced when paperwork demanded them. Emergency contact. Family history. That blank space where affection was supposed to live, I stopped filling it in. My first year away, my mother sent exactly one message. Hope school is going well. No punctuation, no follow-up. It felt less like concern and more like a box checked. Jasmine's social media continued its glossy parade. Scholarships, honors, group photos where her smile widened just enough to announce success. Lily followed suit with a different aesthetic, soft filters, curated vulnerability, captions about gratitude and growth. They were building brands. I was building bones. Richard never spoke badly about them. That was his quiet discipline. He refused to poison my thoughts even when they deserved it. They made choices, he said once. So did you. You don't need villains to validate your story. That restraint taught me something essential. Bitterness is expensive. It costs more than it pays. Still, the ache didn't vanish. It changed shape. It showed up during parent weekends, when my roommate's mother fussed over her bedding and asked if she was eating enough. It showed up at graduation rehearsals, when families crowded bleachers, shouting names like proof. Richard came to every event, always alone, always early. People assumed he was my father. He never corrected them. Neither did I at 19. I made the mistake of going home for Thanksgiving. Not to Richard's, he was traveling for work, but to my parents. I told myself I was ready. That time had softened things. I was wrong. The house looked the same, furniture untouched, family photos arranged like trophies, Jasmine's achievements framed prominently. Lily's dance portraits cascading down the hallway. There was no photo of me past age 12. Dinner was polite, too polite. Conversation skimmed surfaces like stones skipping water. So, my father said, carving turkey. Engineering, that's ambitious. Translation, unexpected. Jasmine smiled across the table. Must be nice having Uncle Richard bankroll everything. The fork froze halfway to my mouth. I pay my own way, I said evenly. She shrugged. Sure, Lily chimed in, syrupy. We just worry he's influencing you too much. That did it. Influence requires presence, I said. You wouldn't know. The table went quiet. Later that night, my mother cornered me in the kitchen. He's filled your head with ideas, she said. You've changed. Yes, I replied. That's the point. I left the next morning before sunrise. I didn't say goodbye. Back at school, Richard didn't ask how it went. He never forced confessions. He just poured coffee and said, "You look lighter." I was. Because something had settled into clarity. They weren't confused. They weren't mistaken. They were simply uninterested, and that was information. At 20, Ethan and I moved in together. It wasn't dramatic, no grand declarations, just two people aligning lives with intention. Richard approved quietly. He respects your autonomy, he observed after meeting Ethan. That matters. Ethan wasn't threatened by Richard's presence. That alone told me everything I needed to know. By 22, my career began to take shape. Small projects at first, modest wins. The kind that don't make headlines but pay rent. Every Friday, Richard and I met for dinner. He'd raise his glass. Miss Mountain, scaling the ladder without tripping. Give it time, I'd reply. I'm clumsy. Clumsy is honest, he said. Arrogant is expensive. I didn't notice the changes at first. The canceled dinners, the fatigue he laughed off. The way he rubbed his shoulder like it carried a secret. I told myself it was age. Then one night, I stopped by unannounced. He was asleep in his armchair at 8. The TV murmured nonsense. When I touched his shoulder, he startled awake, smiling too quickly. Long day, he said. Guess I blinked too long. But his eyes didn't quite meet mine. The signs multiplied, bottles on the counter. Repeated stories, tremors in his hand, we noticed. We pretended not to. Denial can be a shared language. Then the phone rang on a Tuesday. "Ms. Mountain," a voice said. Richard collapsed during a meeting. The hospital room swallowed him. White walls, machines humming like substitutes for breath. He still joked. "5-star stay," he rasped. "Food-s terrible." When the room settled, he took my hand. "I always thought your dad would teach you these things," he said. "I'm glad it was me." "Don't," I whispered. He smiled. "Honest, you were never the extra piece," he said. "You never were." I stayed until he slept. Months later, the call came. He passed in his sleep. The grief was not loud, it was heavy, quiet. All-consuming, he named me executor. Of course he did, I chose white roses. Simple, he hated lilies. The service was small, then my family walked in. Black clothes, public sorrow, private calculation. "We had no idea you were so close," my mother said. "You never asked," I replied. Jasmine asked about the will. Lily adjusted pearls. The audacity would have been impressive if it hadn't been so predictable. When the lawyer called to schedule the reading, he warned me. "Your uncle was very specific." I smiled. So had he always been. The strongest people don't fall apart all at once. They thin first, they cancel plans, they forget small things. They laugh a little less loudly, sit a little more carefully, rest their weight on furniture like it might disappear if they let go. Looking back, I can map Uncle Richard's decline in moments I dismissed because I didn't want them to be real. The first was the missed Friday. Our dinners were sacred. Not dramatic, not sentimental, just consistent. Steak if he was in a good mood, pasta if he wasn't, whiskey for him, soda for me. We talked about my work, his clients, the strange ways people revealed themselves under pressure. Then one Friday came and went with no call. I texted first. "Everything okay?" Minutes passed. Then an hour. Finally, work ran long. Rain check, that should have been nothing. But it lodged under my ribs like a splinter. The next week he showed up late, rubbing his shoulder like it ached deeper than muscle. "Getting old," he said lightly when I asked. He started repeating himself, "Not often." Just enough that I noticed. He'd tell me about a client negotiation, then tell me again the next week with the same phrasing, the same pause before the punchline. When I pointed it out gently, he waved it away. "You listen so well it feels new every time." I let him have that. Denial is a form of love when you're afraid of the alternative. At work, I thrived. Projects stacked up. My confidence grew sturdier, less performative. Ethan and I talked about buying a place someday. Every milestone felt incomplete without Richard's commentary. He noticed my distraction. "Don't put your life on hold to watch mine," he said once, sharper than usual. "I'm not," I lied. "You are," he replied. "And I won't have it." That was the thing about him. He refused to be my gravity. He wanted me orbiting my own future. The hospital call came like a crack in glass. He'd collapsed during a meeting. No warning, no build-up dramatic enough to brace for. When I reached his room, he looked smaller. Fragile in a way I'd never allowed myself to imagine. Still, he joked. Still, he comforted me. Still, he was thinking 3 steps ahead. "I hate hospitals," he muttered. "Smell like fear and overcooked vegetables." "You scared me," I whispered. He shrugged faintly. First time for everything. When he took my hand, it felt deliberate, a choice. "You've exceeded every expectation anyone ever had for you," he said. "Just remember, you were never the extra piece." I laughed through tears when he teased me about dry cleaning bills. That laugh felt borrowed. After he came home, everything slowed. He pretended nothing had changed. I pretended to believe him. We didn't talk about the scare, we talked around it. He asked about my work, gave advice, listened more than he spoke. One night I caught him staring at the wall, eyes unfocused. "Where'd you go?" I asked gently. He blinked, smiled, "Just checking the past for loose ends." That should have terrified me. Instead, I made soup. The final Christmas arrived quietly. He handed me a box wrapped in gold paper. Inside was a leather journal, identical to the one he'd given me at 13. Except this one was full. Notes, jokes, receipts taped in crookedly. Observations written in margins. The last page made my breath stop. If they ever try to erase you again, remember this. You've already written your own chapter. I hugged him harder than ever before. Easy, he laughed. You'll break a rib. I didn't let go right away because something in me knew. When the call came months later, I didn't answer at first. The phone buzzed again, then again. Miss Mountain, Grace said softly, I'm so sorry. He passed in his sleep. No drama, no suffering. Just gone, the days that followed blurred. Paperwork, decisions, condolences that slid off me like water. He'd named me executor, of course he had. At the funeral, I stood near his photo, nodding through grief that felt muted, distant. Then they walked in. My parents, Jasmine, Lily, black clothes, public sorrow, private calculation. We had no idea you were so close, my mother whispered. You never asked, I replied. Jasmine asked about the will. Lily adjusted pearls. They hadn't even buried him yet. That's when something in me hardened, not into anger but into resolve. I wasn't 13 anymore. I wasn't waiting on a porch. I was standing exactly where he'd taught me to stand. And I was done pretending silence meant weakness. Grief doesn't arrive all at once. It seeps. It settles into corners you don't think to check. Empty chairs, unused mugs, phrases you almost text before remembering there's no one left to receive them. For weeks after Richard's funeral, I kept my phone on loud at night, half expecting it to ring with his name. Some habits refuse to die quietly. Ethan watched this with the kind of patience that doesn't demand improvement. He didn't try to fix me. He didn't say he's in a better place or everything happens for a reason. He just existed beside me, steady as gravity. That was the difference. I had been rescued once already. I didn't need saving again. I needed partnership. One night, a few weeks after the funeral, I found myself sitting on the floor of Richard's study. My study now, surrounded by boxes labeled in his precise handwriting. Taxes, property, personal. Personal was the smallest box. Inside were things no one else would have known mattered. Old ticket stubs, a chipped coffee mug from a diner that closed years ago. A folded receipt with a note scrawled across it, Alma liked this place. Don't forget. That broke me, not loudly, not dramatically. I just sat there, shoulders shaking, trying not to make a sound like grief could be contained by silence. Ethan appeared in the doorway, took one look, and sat down beside me without a word. He didn't touch me at first, just leaned close enough that I could feel his warmth. When I finally leaned into him, he wrapped his arms around me like this was always where they'd belonged. I don't know how to do this without him, I whispered. Ethan didn't rush the answer. You already are, he said. He taught you how. That was love without rescue. Not lifting me out of pain, but trusting I could stand inside it and still breathe. The will reading loomed like a storm cloud. My family's messages escalated in frequency and entitlement. My mother's voicemails were thick with nostalgia. Jasmine's texts were sharp, veiled as concern. Lily tried sweetness, emojis like camouflage. They all wanted the same thing. Access. Ethan asked once carefully, do you want me there? No, I said, then paused. Actually, yes, but not inside, he smiled. Waiting nearby, just in case. The law office smelled like leather, old money, and quiet confidence. The kind of place designed to make people sit straighter without being asked. My family arrived dressed for performance. Black tailored coats, somber expressions rehearsed in mirrors. My mother dabbed at dry eyes with a designer tissue. My father shook hands like a man used to being respected by default. They barely looked at me. Mr. Halpern began reading. Small bequests, charities, staff. Jasmine leaned forward. Lily whispered about the house. Then came the line that split the room. To my estranged relatives who remembered me only when my bank balance suited their needs, I leave nothing. Silence detonated. My mother gasped. Jasmine stood halfway out of her chair. Lily blinked like she'd misheard. Then Halpern continued. To my niece, Alma Mountain, abandoned at 13 but never absent since, I leave the entirety of my estate. Everything shifted. Shock turned to fury. Accusations flew. Manipulation, poison, influence. I stayed seated, hand resting calmly on the leather journal. "You did this," my father snapped. "No," I said quietly. "You did." Halpern closed the folder. "The will is airtight." That was the moment I understood something vital. Closure doesn't come from apologies, it comes from clarity. I stood. "If you'll excuse me," I said, "I have things to take care of." Outside, the air felt different, cleaner. Ethan was waiting across the street. He took one look at my face and opened his arms. "How'd it go?" he asked. I smiled, real this time. He kept his word. Weeks later, life didn't magically soften. Grief still lingered. Paperwork still piled up. My family didn't disappear. They just retreated, bitter and loud at a distance. But something fundamental had changed. I wasn't bracing anymore. One evening, Ethan and I sat on the balcony of Richard's house, city lights shimmering below. I held the journal, flipping through familiar pages. "I used to think love meant being chosen," I said slowly. "Now I think it means being seen and staying." Ethan nodded. "And choosing back." I closed the journal. That night, for the first time since Richard's death, I slept without waiting for a call that would never come. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I trusted myself to carry what he'd given me forward. Inheritance isn't just what gets listed on legal paper. It's what you wake up holding long after the signatures dry. In the weeks after the will reading, Richard's house felt larger than it ever had before. Not emptier, just quieter, like a place that had lost its pulse and was waiting to learn a new rhythm. Every room carried evidence of him, not obvious things, subtle ones. The way the couch cushion dipped where he always sat, the faint scent of his cologne lingering in the hallway closet. A chipped mug he refused to throw away, because it reminded him of a diner that served decent eggs and terrible opinions. I moved through the house carefully at first, like a guest overstaying her welcome. Old habits die stubborn deaths, Ethan noticed. "You live here," he said one morning as I hovered in the doorway of the study. "You're allowed to open drawers." I nodded, embarrassed by the truth of it. That study became my classroom. Not because Richard had left instructions, he hadn't, but because he'd left patterns. Systems, evidence of how he thought. His files were immaculate, not rigid but intentional. He labeled things clearly, left notes in margins explaining why decisions were made, not just what they were. It was the same way he'd taught me life, context over command. I realized then that Richard had been preparing me for this long before either of us admitted it. The house wasn't a gift, it was a test. I spent nights sorting paperwork, learning the architecture of his life the way engineers learn load paths, what supports what, where failure would ripple outward. He owned more than I'd known. Not extravagantly, but strategically. Properties that didn't scream wealth but whispered stability. He built to last. Some nights, grief hit sideways. I'd find a note in his handwriting tucked inside a book I hadn't opened yet, or a calendar reminder that read "Ask Alma if she's eaten." Those moments knocked the breath from me more than the funeral ever did. Ethan never tried to hurry me through it. Instead, he helped where I asked. He fixed a leaky sink, cooked meals when I forgot, sat with me in silence when words felt like work. One night, as we folded laundry in the living room, he said, "You know he didn't leave you a burden." I paused. "It feels like one sometimes." "That's because responsibility always does," he replied. "But it's also trust. Trust. Richard hadn't just believed in who I was, he'd believed in who I would become." That realization scared me more than the grief. My family didn't disappear quietly. They tried emails next. Formal, legal-sounding, suggesting mediation, suggesting fairness, suggesting that blood ought to count for something. I didn't respond. Then came the guilt. My mother wrote a long letter, actual paper, like that added weight to sincerity. She spoke about misunderstandings, about how hard things had been back then, about how they'd always loved me, even if they hadn't known how to show it. There was no apology, just explanation. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the journal Richard had given me, the one he'd filled for me, not as forgiveness, as record. Because history matters, especially the parts people try to rewrite. At work, my responsibilities grew. I was promoted quietly, no announcement, just more trust, more autonomy. the same way Richard had always done things. One afternoon, my boss pulled me aside. "You carry yourself differently," she said. "Like someone who knows where she's standing." I smiled, thinking of a 13-year-old girl hunched over a backpack on a porch. "I had good teachers," I replied. Ethan and I talked about the future more seriously now. Not hypotheticals. Logistics. We didn't rush, but we didn't avoid either. One evening, sitting at the kitchen table Richard had refinished himself years ago, Ethan said, "You don't need to become him to honor him." I looked up. "You just need to keep being you," he added. That was the whole point. That night, I opened Richard's journal again. Near the back, I found a page I hadn't noticed before. Legacy isn't about control. It's about continuity. I closed the book slowly. The house no longer felt like a museum. It felt like a foundation. And for the first time, I understood what Richard had truly left me. Not money, not property, permission. Permission to take up space, to build without apology, to stop asking whether I belonged and start deciding where I would go next. Outside, the city hummed, alive, unfinished. So was I. And for once, that didn't scare me. Silence has a strange gravity. Ignore it long enough and it stops feeling empty. It starts to feel intentional, like a decision rather than an absence. That was the kind of silence my family lived in after the will reading. Not retreat, not reflection, strategy. They waited. I knew they would. The first confrontation didn't happen in a courtroom or a lawyer's office. It happened on a Wednesday evening, 6 weeks after Richard's death, when the past decided it was tired of being ignored. I came home late from work, brain humming with deadlines and structural calculations, thinking only about leftovers and a shower. The porch light was on. I never left it on. My stomach tightened before I even reached the door. My mother was sitting in the living room like she'd always belonged there. She stood when she saw me, arms already opening, grief pasted carefully across her face. "Alma!" I stopped just inside the doorway, didn't move forward, didn't invite her closer. "How did you get in?" I asked. Her smile faltered. "Your father still has a key." Of course he did, a relic of entitlement. I took my coat off slowly, deliberately, and hung it up, bought myself time. "What do you want?" I asked. She clasped her hands together, the way she used to before delivering what she thought was wisdom. "We need to talk, like family." I met her eyes fully then. "We haven't been family in a long time." She flinched. "Good." She sat back down, smoothing her skirt. "We made mistakes. We were overwhelmed. You were difficult." There it was. "I was 13, I said evenly, "and you left me alone." Her mouth opened, then closed. She exhaled sharply. "You don't understand what was happening back then." "No," I replied. "I understand exactly what happened. You chose yourselves." She reached into her purse and pulled out a folder, legal documents. "I don't want to fight," she said. "But this isn't fair." I laughed once, short, unkind. "Fair," I echoed. "You left me with a note on a fridge. You didn't call for years. And now you're in my living room asking for fairness?" Her voice hardened. "He manipulated you." "No," I said quietly. "He raised me." The words hung between us like a verdict. She stood abruptly. "You owe us." That was the moment something crystallized. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel fear. I felt finished. "I don't owe you anything," I said. "And you're not welcome here." She stared at me, stunned. Then rage crept into her expression. "You think money makes you powerful?" she snapped. I smiled, not cruelly, calmly. "No," I said. "Clarity does." I opened the door. She hesitated, then left without another word. 2 days later, Jasmine called. I didn't answer. She texted instead. "We can be civil about this," I replied once. "We already are. I'm just not negotiating." Lily tried last. She showed up crying, mascara smudged, voice trembling with rehearsed vulnerability. "I don't want to lose you," she said. "You already did," I replied gently. "You just noticed." After that, the silence returned. But this time it was mine. That night I sat alone in the study, Richard's journal open in front of me. I traced the indentation of his handwriting, feeling steadier with every line. Ethan came in quietly, leaned against the doorframe. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes," I said, surprised to find it true. I finally am, he nodded. That was always coming. I closed the journal. Yeah, I said, but now it's over. Outside, the city lights flickered like distant stars. Inside, the house felt settled. Solid, no ghosts tugging at the walls. No voices demanding space they hadn't earned. I had faced them, and I had not folded inward. Richard would have approved. People think a will is about distribution. Who gets what? Who loses? Who feels satisfied enough to stop circling? But Richard's will wasn't written to divide things. It was written to conclude something. After the confrontations, I avoided the study for a few days. Not out of fear, out of respect. I'd used that room as an anchor while bracing myself against the past, and now that the past had finally said its piece, I needed to enter it differently. When I did return, it was with intention. Morning light spilled across the desk, catching dust motes midair. I sat where Richard used to sit, not as an intruder now, but as a successor. The chair creaked under my weight the same way it had under his. Continuity. I opened the leather folder Halpern had given me, the personal addendum to the will. Not legally necessary, he'd said. Just explanatory. Richard had never been sentimental in public, but here, in ink meant only for me, he was precise in a different way. Alma, if you're reading this, it means I got out clean. Good. I hate messes. I smiled despite myself. He explained his decisions plainly. Why certain relatives were excluded. Why charities were chosen. Why properties were structured the way they were. Then the page turned. This house is not a shrine. Change it, paint it, fill it with noise, or sell it if you want, just don't preserve it out of guilt. My throat tightened. He knew me too well. He'd anticipated the temptation to freeze everything exactly as it was, like grief could be honored through stagnation. I didn't give you this life to maintain it. I gave it to you to use it. I closed my eyes. That was the will, not the legal one, the real one. In the weeks that followed, I made decisions quickly, not impulsively, decisively. I kept the house, but I remodeled the kitchen. Changed the paint in the study. Replaced the couch cushions. Left his mug on a shelf, not as an altar, just as a quiet nod. I hired a property manager for the rentals. Set up a scholarship fund for kids who fell through bureaucratic cracks, the ones who needed stability more than sympathy. I stopped waiting for permission. Ethan moved in slowly, thoughtfully. No grand announcement, just a toothbrush at first, then clothes, then the quiet understanding that we were building something mutual, not inherited. One evening, as we unpacked boxes together, he asked, "Do you ever feel guilty?" I thought about it. "No," I said. "I feel accountable." He smiled. "That suits you." At work, I proposed a project that scared me 6 months earlier. It got approved. I led the team. I trusted my instincts the way Richard had trusted his. Sometimes, late at night, I still reached for my phone. Sometimes I still dreamed of that porch, but the dreams had changed. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was walking away from it, backpack lighter, spine straighter, house lights glowing behind me instead of ahead. On the anniversary of his death, I sat alone in the study and opened the journal one last time. I added a page. You were right. I didn't disappear. I expanded. I closed the book and placed it back on the shelf. The will had done its job, not because it had given me everything, but because it had confirmed what I already knew. I was never the extra piece. I was the continuation. Houses don't save people. That's the lie we tell when we're afraid to name what actually did the saving. A house is wood and stone and wires. It holds heat. It leaks when neglected. It remembers nothing on its own. But people leave fingerprints on the spaces they love. Richard's house never rescued me. It didn't reach out a hand or speak my name into the dark. What it did was quieter and braver. It stayed. When everyone else decided I was too inconvenient, too complicated, too easy to leave behind, this house became proof that permanence still existed. That doors could close without locking you out. That someone could choose you without demanding repayment. I walk through it now without hesitation. The floorboards still creak, but I know where. The light hits the stairs differently in the afternoon since I changed the paint. The balcony smells like coffee and city air instead of grief. It's not the same house, Neither am I. Sometimes I catch myself speaking to him, not out loud, not exactly. Just a thought, a reflex. You'd like this, I'll think, or you were right. And maybe that's what remains when someone leaves properly. Not absence, alignment. Ethan and I host dinners now, real ones, loud ones. Friends crowded around a table that has learned new laughter. Stories overlap, glasses clink. No one tiptoes around the past. The house absorbs it all without complaint. On quiet mornings, I sit on the balcony with the journal open, not Richard's, mine. The one I started the week after he died. Its pages aren't neat. They don't try to explain anything. They just record. Because I learned something vital from him, memory isn't about preservation. It's about continuation. I no longer measure my life by what I survived. I measure it by what I sustain. Stability, choice, presence. When I think of the girl on the porch, I don't feel sorrow anymore. I feel respect. She endured the waiting. She believed silence meant possibility instead of rejection. She walked forward when someone finally opened the door, and she kept walking long after. This house didn't keep me trapped. It kept me long enough to become myself. And then it let me go.